Hi everyone, welcome back to the Watch Insider. My name is Brian, this is Tim. And thank you everybody for logging on. So we have a fun show tonight filled with some talk of new watches, pre-owned watches, and most importantly, 5 different tourbillons from 5 different brands. So we're going to get us started with a bang. Tim, what do you got on the wrist tonight?
Okay, so tonight, I guess I'm not with the program. I've got a tourbillon, but I'm not wearing it. I'm still rocking the complete calendar vibe from last night's Watches Live. JLC Grand Memovox, it's a perpetual calendar, it's an alarm. I'm actually going to fire it up a little later in the show so you can hear it. Platinum, 250-piece limited series. Proof that even 15 years ago, blue dials were a thing, not new. Everything comes back eventually. That is fashion, and that is watches.
You haven't worn this one in a while.
No, honestly, and I missed it. This was my most worn watch for the year 2015. Every year I've had a different most worn watch. I think this is going to be the king for 18.
They could bring, what's funny is they could probably bring that watch back almost and just reissue it as a current version, and it could, you know, I think it would do very well.
I think it would, absolutely, because first of all, white metal, second, blue dial. And it's not just any blue, it's a difficult to capture kind of slate metallic. I really like this thing, and this is one of those, I spent too much money, but I've never regretted a cent of it kind of watches. Like, you can waste money on so many things that cost less. And yet, sometimes when you get the right watch, it's like a soulmate. You never regret the cost of fun. It's the memories and the experience. That was also the first watch I ever wore to Switzerland. What are you wearing tonight?
So I have on a Zenith Daytona, you know, white dial, you know, black rings around the sub, so pretty straightforward. I'm sure most people watching the show have seen this watch before. This was the first, I should say second Rolex I'd ever had. My first Rolex was a mid-size platinum dial Yachtmaster 35mm, so cool watch. What I really liked about this is I got it, you know, probably 5-6 years ago. And the reason why I ended up getting this one was I really wanted a steel Daytona white dial. I really didn't have too much preference between the silver ring or the black ring of the Zenith. And at the time, Zenith Daytonas were selling for a lot less than the current iteration of the watch.
That's a fact.
So,
by a lot less, a lot less.
So it was like, you know, the current version was probably selling for around 12,000, you know, a little bit above retail. These were selling for around 8 or 9. People didn't really want the older version, so I said, you know what, like, I like them both. I'd rather save the money. I got the Zenith. I've had it ever since, and you know, lo and behold, you know, these are, you know, bringing more now. So.
Now, let me ask you a quick question now. Compared to the Patrizzi dial, which is black with the metallic registers, which Zenith Daytona is hotter right now? Is it the white dial or is it the black dial?
So definitely the white dial. Yeah, are you talking about the older Rolexes or current version of the watch?
No, old 90s era Zenith Daytona.
I still think that the white dials are performing better. You know, it's time tested. They've performed better. The current version of the watch, it's performing a little bit better. You know, I think that you know, more people associate the watch with the white dial version of the watch.
That's definitely true. It was the one from the Rolex commercials in the 90s after all. Plus, I'm always shocked. People want the white dial, black ceramic bezel watch. I can't understand why they don't want the black on black. But hey guys, just consider it a buying opportunity. Buy low.
I personally like the black on black better.
That is my preference.
It's a little bit more monochromatic, which I like.
Ah, there's the Memovox right there. I tempted you. I had to share. Okay, enough of that. So tonight, the most, should we say vaunted, legendary, controversial, fabulous, frivolous complication of them all?
I mean, I would probably say the most useless but compelling complication that there is.
That's a great way to dovetail with today's news. You might have seen the Alfred Helwig limited series from Glasuta Original. That one featuring the caliber 9403 automatic with the pano date, the panorama datum. We actually have its forebear. This is a handsome watch that came out in the late 2000s. I always likened to a black and white cookie. It's the Pano Tourbillon XL, and the nomenclature might strike you as odd because there is no panorama datum here. There is no date of any kind except this radial indicator. So why is it a panel? I don't know, but in any language, any nomenclature, this is a gorgeous watch. First things first, Geo is famed for its flying tourbillon. Of course, 1920, Alfred Helweg, now the namesake of his own series, invented the flying tourbillon, which is a tourbillon that has a bridge on the backside only, so you can see the cage rotating freely on the front. Now, this one is particularly special because it's a filigree style with a wire cage, all hand finished. You can see that gorgeous overcoil on the balance, and then you can see there is a diamond capstone. That's right, that's not a clear sapphire, that's a true diamond capstone, and it has a counterpart on the opposite side. This watch uses synthetic rubies and 2 real diamonds. Gorgeous perlage below. This is a stately 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour, retrograding date. The backside of the watch is actually fairly spare, all things considered, but nicely hand finished. You can see the jewels are set in screw-fixed chaton. There is a beautifully textured set of glasuta stripes, and I really have to call attention to those because if you've seen standard Côte de Genève, especially stamped Côte de Genève, then you're used to seeing these monotonous ribs across a movement. These actually have a progression from light to dark, and a directional grain. That's gorgeous stuff, just like the double spiral that is actually it's actually the last path on the way to the mainspring barrel, and it has a double spiral. It's adjacent to the click and the click spring. If I can capture that, that's hand finishing of the highest order right there. That double spiral wheel.
I do wish, though, that the sapphire back was a little bit larger. When I see a small sapphire back on a larger case watch, it almost leads me to think that the movement's a little bit too small for the case.
Well,
like this really probably should have been, you know, instead of a 42 millimeter watch, it really probably should have been like a 38 millimeter watch.
This was made in 2008 when 42 was considered almost a lady's size. That was the height of excess just before the fall. Back then, this was probably considered a discreet dress size. And yes, the caliber 4103 manual wind 48-hour power reserve is too small for the case. But you know what? It's got such a compelling dial, and as a native New Yorker, this thing reminds me of those fondant-covered black and white cookies, and once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, no. So I mean, it's a great watch. I think that obviously the flying seconds can act as a flying tourbillon can act as a seconds hand for the watch. You've got the galvanized black, which even offers a more starker contrast against the opposing color up top. Beautiful watch. Me personally, I wish it was all a single color, simply just because I would prefer the uniformity across the dial. But nevertheless, I think that it really makes a statement.
I can do a quasi wrist jet here. Guys, this watch for me, that's on my 16 centimeter wrist. Just for scale, that doesn't seem too big for what it is. I would also say it's probably decently flat, so it has more of a broad flat profile than a tall one. This watch for me was a case of meeting one of my heroes. I had idolized this watch for years before we brought it in, and it was hard just to find photos of it online. Then to see it on the wrist, it was kind of a showstopper moment for me. I love this thing, and again, if I didn't have my own JLC tourbillon, having kind of attained my ultimate grail watch, that would be at the top of my shopping list for a tourbillon because it's beautiful, it's rare, and even amongst tourbillon watches, it's very unusual.
Mm-hmm. So, should we say a couple hellos to the chat?
Give a shout out to our chat box.
Okay, hello Bishop, thank you for joining in. Matt Forster, hello again. We've got Thumper JDM from Bakersfield. Tim, any other names that you recognize?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I see Simon Holt is in there, Joshua Polanski, Area K, longtime viewer, M. Piker's joining us right here, AH. Thumper JDM, he has been with us forever, but not quite as long as Captain Zed. He's been like a Watch You Want and Watchbox lifer. That guy has been a stalwart. Todd Piasecki joining us from the American Midwest, and Eddie Landsberg from right up I-95 in New Jersey, also proprietor of the Watch You Want Now Watchbox Facebook group. By the way, here's a question from Stephen Trong, who's asking, do carousel or flying tourbillon require more craftsmanship to incorporate into a movement? They can. Now, a carousel is different from a flying tourbillon in that a carousel has a separate power source to turn the assembly and operate the escapement. In a tourbillon, if you stopped the carriage from rotating, it would also stop the balance from beating. The escapement would halt.
Will the carousel, is it generally run from a single barrel, or will they have a second barrel specifically for the extra power?
They'll have two separate trains. They'll generally run off one barrel. The ultimate example of a carousel is the Ulysse Nardin Freak. Now, there are examples with the Diavolo, for instance, where you have a tourbillon on top of the carousel, but traditionally, if you have an escapement on a carriage, and the carriage has a power source and the escapement has a power source, you can turn that carriage. You can use it as an hour hand, you can use it for different purposes, and it's not going to stop or damage the escapement. For that reason, more work may go into creating a carousel because there are going to have to be two separate powertrains, one for the carriage and one for the escapement. In terms of flying tourbillon, I would say for the most part, the #1 draw on the talents of the watchmakers will be finishing it, because once you remove the upper bridge, and let me show you a great example of that. Here is a tourbillon with a large bridge right next to a tourbillon with no upper bridge. So you have flying tourbillon, tourbillon. You can see how on the Amvox 3, a large part of the carriage is actually obscured by that rose gold bridge, whereas with the caliber 4103 in the Glasuta, there's nothing to hide. So you see every part of it. You see the innermost workings of the mechanism, the cage. You really have to finish this thing to the nth degree, or it's going to betray all of its flaws. Whereas here, the finish can be a bit more industrial, and I'm not going to say it
like the
requires
artistry
less
of the
skill.
bridge, though.
It does bring a different element, because here the bridge was self-consciously styled.
And I like that they kept the opening, like, you know, that it's much more exposed at the bottom. The bridge really isn't covered up
Certainly.
on the sides.
It has a function on this dial. There are some bridges that are simply there to hold the thing in place. And a great example of that, if we want to progress to a watch that's sort of like a hybrid of the two, a small bridge and a mostly open tourbillon.
So we have the Remontoir FP Journe dead second tourbillon.
This is the...
To me, this is the epitome of, and again, I know that we tout FP Journe, you know, consistently, virtually on every single episode, but to me, this is what I think you want out of a tourbillon if you're buying one. And, you know, again, for a complication that really at this point is almost a glorified moon phase, you know, and all brands are doing it, from Maurice Lacroix to FP Journe to Patek Phillipe to the Glachute. I mean, I think every brand at this point, no matter what, has a tourbillon, and they're all at all different price points. I think this is, for me, the apex of you know, of what I would want to see in a turb.
And now, there's a couple of interesting things about this watch. Of course, this has been the design that FP Journe has built since 2003. It has had the basically horizontally arrayed power reserve rather than vertical, and there's a solid disc over the jumping seconds, which is itself run by the Remontoir constant force system. So this is the modern version. This is the second execution of his tourbillon with constant force. Now, I will say this, though. You can see some elements of both the Glasuta Original style and the Amvox. There is a bridge, but it's only a half bridge, and it's completely specular finished. You see how it's continuously rounded and optically polished. That's called a specular rounding. And then it's only a one-sided bridge, so you see most of the cage, and the cage, like the Glasuta, is a filigree-style hand-finished wire. So there's really nothing to hide here. That's a beautiful way to execute a double-anchored tourbillon. If you must have a bridge, make it disappear, and that's what FP Journe did. Now, this watch has another interesting feature. In addition to the Remontoir, which is this bladed spring you see on the case back, it features a unique step-down system such that when it gets to about 16 hours of power reserve left out of 42, 42 is its max, when it gets down to 16, it disengages the deadbeat second and it becomes a sweep seconds hand to maintain as much precision as possible and prevent the mechanism from stopping. So it has that little quirk built into it, and actually a very similar system is built into this year's Portuguese or constant force from IWC. But you can see that's a gorgeous piece. Every generation and every execution of the FP Journe tourbillon has been sensational. I'm still waiting for my rock star reference, the tourbillon Jade, to come in.
But no, and this particular color combination, the rose gold with the black, is actually a boutique piece. So it's not something that you're going to see as often as the rose gold silver dial or the platinum silver dial.
So, guys, this is an interactive show. Why do a live show if we can't answer questions? Forward those questions in our chat box. Brian is going to be monitoring. I'm monitoring. We love to show you the wares, but we also love to go off script when we can answer your questions and make this more fun for you. So, guys, if you've got questions, forward them up. This is the time. This is our most unscripted show of the week. All right. So
is it really?
It really is, because the program you send me is about this long, and we freestyle off of that. It's also why we don't have as many live graphics on this show, but we do a lot of macro shots of the watches. Okay, so question Do we prefer brass or rose gold movements? This came through the chat box. First of all, which one's more collectible? Then tell me, which one do you prefer?
So more collectible is brass because it was the first watches that he made when he launched FP Journe as a brand. They were quickly discontinued after only a few years. And now, as people look back and they want to find the older iterations of his pieces, like the older resonances, the first series pieces from the early 2000s, collectors are looking for those brass movements. Me personally, probably the rose gold movements because it separates the brand from everybody else. You know, crafting a movement in rose gold takes more finesse, more craftsmanship. It's a softer metal than brass. So when they're refinishing the movement, it's easier to make a mistake, which means that there's a higher failure rate if you do make that mistake. So the overall effect is stunning. And when you hold the watch in your hand, I really think that there's a different weight to the watch in an FP Journe than in another watch, just simply because of the weight of that gold.
That's a fact, and I can tell you, having held an FP Journe movement blank, which was basically the raw material before it was milled to create the caliber, it feels like a completed watch, a completed precious metal watch in the hand. That said, I'm going to go sort of with a neither nor. Now, the brass movements...
Depends on the watch, I guess.
The brass movements are rhodium plated, and the gold movements are bare rose gold. I love the ruthenium series, where you get the brass coated with ruthenium. It's almost like a blue-gray, and it looks like you have a movement made of slate.
They're fabulous.
Yeah, they're awesome. That would be my ultimate.
It's like a trick question, you know. I didn't get that option.
Well, it was there. It's there for the taking. You have to seize the moment. Okay, so Robert Dixon joining us from Scotland. This guy once sent me the wackiest picture of a green BMW M4. I like could not get over this car. Robert, if you got more shots of that car, forward them to me. You know where to find me. Eric Nielsen, question about Geo, Glasuta Original. Okay, with the discontinuation of the Sport Evolution, will pre-owned pieces go up in value? I find that's generally a tough one for us to sell on market when we get a Geo Sport Evo. What do you think of those? Do they have potential?
So, I mean, I think that it's, right now, I think that it's what Glasuta is more synonymous with the Panamatic Lunars, and I would say the more casual dress watches. Their sport pieces fly under the radar. I think they're great watches, and you can actually pick them up at, really compelling prices, which is nice. So, you can probably, see some of them out there in the probably $4,000 to $6,000 range is my guesstimate. And for a in-house manufactured movement from a great brand at that sort of price point, I think that they make great options.
And here's the thing, guys. Like Brian said, compared to what they sold for, and everything cost more, even in relative terms during the 2000s, there was a pricing sobriety that took place after the Great Recession. The Sport Evos and their more exuberant, evolved variant, the Sport Evo Impacts, which had like big red shock absorbers in the case, those are watches that are not going to lose any value. So if you buy that, you pay the cost to service it while you own it. You're going to own and run it for the cost of service and maintenance. And you're probably going to private sell it for what you paid for it. Now, like the Chopard Pro 1 series during the 2000s, I don't necessarily see these as being imminent gainers, but it's a fantastic sports watch, like the Pro 1s from Chopard, from a company not really known for the type. So you start with a company that doesn't make a lot of watches, and then you narrow the field.
I don't think you're going to see much appreciation in the long run, but I also don't think that if you're buying one at a compelling price, I don't think there's much downside either. I think it's a great watch to have. It's a great watch to have in the collection. And if you find one that you like at a good price, I think that it's there's really no bad decision.
And if you get the Sport Evo Impact Tourbillon, you get a tourbillon that can take a hit. Not too many of those out there.
Moving up a little bit, Robert Dixon, Brian, I call the AD. I have a Steel Sky Dweller on order for an update. They said they are even struggling to get basic date just. Is everyone having this problem? So this is definitely a worldwide problem. There's a major Rolex shortage in the market right now, all across the world. So Rolex traditionally has always stopped shipping sometime in late November, early December. And this is a traditional practice of ours. Once they sort of hit their yearly goals, budgets, they slow down the shipping until the new year and they pick it back up. For whatever reason, perhaps they hit sales targets early. This slowdown in shipping started a month early. So you see, a lack of available product in most stores. And, on top of that, based on the market conditions right now, more people are gravitating towards Rolex than some other brands where, you know, you may have had people purchasing other products in the past. A lot of people are sort of moving into Rolex. So I think there's an increased level of demand for the product along with a diminishing level of availability. And it's become an exacerbated problem because with Rolex in particular, you have to sell it within your own market.
Yes.
And that's, you know, all Rolex retailers follow the rules. And if you're looking for Rolex, you have to go to your local AD, and a lot of the ADs may not have the watch, and you're sort of prevented from going outside of your market. So it sort of makes it, you know, that much tougher. But again, I'm sure that the shipping's going to pick up in the new year, so we're only a few weeks away. And you know, again, I hope that you do get that Sky Dweller because it's an amazing watch.
Yeah, so you're looking at basically three things, guys. First, Rolex is unique in that they plan how many models and how many units of each model they're going to make for a year, and then they build out to that and they stop. Every other company is going to continue running the dies and the lines until they absolutely have to stop to retool for the next year's watches. Rolex has a goal, and they always meet the goal, and then they stop. That's unlike any other watchmaker, with possible exceptions being like FP Journe and Patek Philippe, that echelon. And Rolex does it with almost 1 million watches a year. Second, like Brian said, Rolex watches really don't travel. That's something that is almost universal in the watch industry. Surplus inventory, finding needy markets. Because you're either a Rolex retailer or you're an ex-Rolex retailer, you follow the rules. And the watches do not travel. You sell within your market. You sell out of a brick and mortar gate. Nothing goes in the mail, nothing goes by airplane. And then finally, there is the sense, I think even within Rolex right now, that they're ahead of the game, and remarkably so. So it might just be that they're a little quicker with the hook than they've usually been in terms of tapering down supply. Maybe they met their goal faster. Maybe they were just trying to create a little bit of pent-up demand. But the bottom line is Rolex is a company that manages supply and demand very well, and they might just feel they're going to get ahead of the market, which is recovering in general, and make things just a bit more scarce. It might even be that they balanced their production differently this year, knowing they had a bunch of strong steel watches coming out of Baselworld. They might have said, we're going to make a smaller proportion of steel. We're going to do kind of a macro Patek kind of thing.
And you know what? And I think that this scarcity in the end is something that Rolex enthusiasts appreciate. It's you know, it's like a catch-22. So many people gravitate towards the brand for exactly this reason, but at the same time, when it becomes difficult to get product, you know, it can be frustrating. But you know, when you do get that watch and you do have that Rolex, it's times like this when you say to yourself, like, damn, that's why I picked this brand.
And the good news is, if you're buying a pre-owned Rolex, the rising tide lifts all boats. Demand on the primary side spurs demand on the secondary side. Rolex, always a good buy. So question from P. Barrow, who's asking, Tim, how does the Breguet finishing compare to other big brands like Patek Philippe, VC, AP? Okay, well, here's the thing you need to know about Breguet. There's the Type 20, Type 21, the Type 22, and then there's basically everything else. So if you're looking at something like, you know, the 7887, a Grand Complication, or you're looking at the Oramundi, you're looking at a true upper echelon Breguet, you're going to get finishing that is second to none. It's going to be on the same level as the Patek, the AP, the Vacheron. It might be a style that's a little bit more unique to Breguet. For instance, they've been doing some movement engraving lately that I happen to like, but you're going to get the same level of finish. Now, the thing is, Breguet also has these sports watches that are designed to be volume players, and when you're looking at something that's basically a reworked La Manna 1350 from the 70s. They're going to do a great job of improving it, but that watch is built to a price point, so some concessions have to be made. You know, there's a reason it doesn't cost as much as a Nautilus chronograph. There are a whole host of reasons. So you're going to get very good finish, but like JLC, like a Zenith, like a Glasuta Original, there's a spectrum of finish within Breguet. You get the tool watch at the low end that has a lot of features for the money, but maybe not the haute de gamme hand finish. And then you've got the no argument, top of the line, six-figure complication, and that's going to be finished beautifully. And that's kind of how you regard Breguet, whereas with Patek, there's more or less a floor to how low their pricing goes, and it's not like you get better finishing when you pay more. You generally get more complication and exclusivity.
And I think, you know what, and I think that that's one thing that does set Patek apart from the rest. But I think that, you know, if you look at most brands, as you start getting into those upper echelon of complications, you do see a higher level of detail going into the finishing the movements because, you know, let's face it, a lot of the price, you know, a lot of the value or let's call it what the price of these watches cost is in that movement and in the finishing of that movement. I want to say that 60% of Vacherons' cost for a watch is in the hand finishing of the movement parts, which is a very large amount.
And it's an excruciating investment of time, too. That's the thing. Nothing is more expensive than a specialist artisan's time. So when it takes 3 or 4 months to take the caliber 1141, the Lemania Abauche, and bring less than 100 of those to saleable condition, 3 months for a couple of dozen of them, no wonder it's going to be something that sucks up most of the value you pay to obtain the product. You're paying for the time of a specialist, and as anyone knows from law and medicine, you pay for a specialist.
But no, and you know what? And there's always going to be hearsay and rumors about what's going on in the watch industry. And I think one of the prevailing rumors, which we talked about on the show before, is that theory that Rolex is due for a price increase, and that it would be worldwide if they did have one, and that consumers would probably be okay with it. So, and in a time of extreme shortage amongst the retailers, what better time than to have a price increase when there's diminished product available, and, Rolex is going to be in a position ultimately to ship product in plenty all over the world. So, it makes sense from a strategic standpoint. I don't know if that's actually the case, as, like, they're like Apple. It's like a guarded secret you would never find out to the day it launches. But it seems like it could make sense.
True, but the one thing you can't get from Rolex is a tourbillon, which brings us to our third watch of the evening. Probably, I don't know. I love that Geo, but this is a combination of the brand I love with a series I love, inspired by a car I love. It's the Amvox 3. This was the all-time high watermark for the 2004 to 2015 Amvox series. It was the most expensive. It was the most complicated. It was the most distinct from other JLC products, with the possible exception of the Amvox 2. But this watch combined a second time zone, and you can see there's actually a sapphire AM/PM disc on the dial. Now, what really set this one apart was the unique manner in which the date jumped over the tourbillon. So let me see if I can roll back, because you can move the date bidirectionally. And in the course of a single night, from the 31st to the 1st, the date jumps straight over the tourbillon case. You can see the unique Maltese cross wheel that performs that operation in 2 steps through the night. Now, a couple of interesting things about this watch. You can see it is a ceramic case. It was JLC's first round ceramic case. The Reverso Squadra just beat it by about 18 months. This was a 2018-2009 model year debut, 300 pieces with a combination of rose gold and ceramic, and it does have a handsome treatment of the ceramic case. As you'll note, it's both polished and satin finished. Or actually, I should say it's more of a media blasted finish, because it doesn't have a directional grain, but the combination of the polish and the blasted finish is exceptional. The lip of this 90-degree break to the box section sapphire is just sexy. And then on the case back, this is one of the best looking JLC calibers ever, certainly in the automatic family.
The watch itself is gorgeous, and one of the things that I love about the JLC tourbillons in particular, well, I should say all of their complications, is that most companies, they put a tourbillon in a watch, they tack on a really high retail because it's a tourbillon, and the watch hits the market. But JLC has always been, I think, ultra competitive when it comes to their tourbillon watches. From this watch being priced at under 100 for what you're getting, but really for the master control tourbillons that are priced in the $40,000 to $50,000 range. And when I think you take a brand like JLC relative to some of the other brands that may be on the table or that are available out there, it's hard to find a compelling reason when they're charging $40,000, $50,000 for a in-house crafted caliber tourbillon versus paying double, triple that some of the other brands offer that aren't as nice.
I'll say this, a quick shout out to that winding mass, carbon fiber winding rotor arms, and a platinum iridium winding mass, unidirectional with ceramic bearings. That's probably the most efficient winding system in the history of the world, at least on a rotor basis and a bearing basis. That's one of the few technologies from the 2007 Master Compressor Extreme Lab 1 that ever found its way into a production JLC watch. Of course, you do have those rose gold coated bridges, which are absolutely beautiful. And I'll say this, we often talk about the tourbillon being a bit of a frivolous addition. The base caliber from this watch in the steel master tourbillon actually won the 2009 Livox timing competition, a chronometry competition in which it saw off about a dozen and a half contestants, and most importantly, achieved an annual deviation rate of about 47 seconds per year deviation. It was this basic caliber, and it beat no less an adversary than JLC's own Gyro Tourbillon 2, the Reverso Gyro Tourbillon. This basic tourbillon caliber achieved less than half a second deviation per day, and it beat the Gyro Tourbillon. So let's not completely write off the chronometric potential of the tourbillon. From a great house, it's still there.
I think that was all one breath, wasn't it?
I think I snuck a breath in there.
Yeah, maybe
I think it's
one
like
or
one
two.
and a half.
But no, so one watch on the table that I definitely want to touch because I think that it was a major it was a disruptor, a beautiful watch, and caused quite a stir at Baselworld, and that would be the Tag Heuer O2T connected tourbillon. So this was a watch that when Tag Heuer launched it, everybody said, who is going to buy a Tag Heuer tourbillon? But when they came out of the gate priced at around $15,000 or so, it made heads turn. This is a movement that was completely designed in-house by Tag Heuer. It's a skeletonized movement, low inertia tourbillon in carbon and titanium, the only one currently on the market. And interestingly, I shouldn't even say interestingly enough, but amazingly, I believe it's the only COSC certified tourbillon that's available on the market.
At the moment, it might be. Historically, you could have a Patek Phillipe 5101, but the fact that we're comparing a $18,000 Tag Heuer to that is a good frame of reference for how rare that is, a COSC certified tourbillon. I'll also say this, guys, check it out, free sprung and a flying tourbillon.
I mean, the watch is freaking gorgeous, and you know, this particular iteration of the watch is a limited edition that was made to be modularized with a connected watch. So this came in a limited edition box set. You have here the connected piece. The straps snap off really easily. They've got a really interesting and unique system, and you can snap on the connected watch and call it go about your day. But when I first saw the watch, I was floored by how nice it was and how nicely it was crafted. And I think that this is really a testament to what's happened with the tourbillon as a complication, in that, in the eyes of consumers, it's this, really haute horology complication that's generally extremely expensive. And Tag Heuer managed to really sort of turn it on its heels and put it into a beautifully executed watch at an extremely beyond, compelling price point.
Yeah, this is an amazing achievement, if only because they actually COSC certified a tourbillon.
Talk about putting your ego where your mouth is. I mean, you enter, there are Tag Heuer and Breitling watches that cost even a fraction of this, and those earn COSC certificates. Could you imagine if they had to go back for adjustment? That would make it to the watch press. That would be out on the fora. That's bold. Most companies will say, look, we made a tourbillon, but they won't offer you any more proof of the chronometric performance than Memorigin will on an $800 tourbillon.
Yeah, I mean, this is an in-house designed, COSC certified flying tourbillon chronograph that's the same price as, I mean, a Steel Sky Dweller. I mean, you could go through the list.
You'll pay more on the secondary market right now for a steel ceramic Daytona.
It's less money than an AP diver.
And
for a time-only automatic watch.
65-hour power reserve, automatic winding, COSC, flying tourbillon, free sprung, in-house, chronograph. That's the other thing. We didn't even mention all that, and it's a chronograph.
Yeah. So I mean, again, it's a great watch. I think that that Tag, they got great praise for the watch, but I don't think that they got quite enough praise for how well it was executed and how nicely it came out. And I think that people really have to get I think it's getting over that hump, like you're going to buy a Tag Heuer tourbillon. But you know what? I think that as the market comes to appreciate some of these watches from brands, and let's call it watch guys begin to venture out of the norm, I think Grand Seiko coming onto the market helps this watch, because I think that as people you think Seiko, oh wow, and then you do some research, and then when you actually look into a watch like this that you never would have looked at before, that's when these watches start performing.
I'll also say this, guys. I think there might be some Chopard LUC watches out there that get a chronometer cert, and I'm pretty sure
those are great watches.
The Fernand Berthoud, all versions of that get chronometer certs for their tourbillon. So I want to give credit where credit's due. I also want to throw this out, guys. Look, for years, Tag Heuer did things with prototype level watches basically executed by Guy Simon in a separate operation that had nothing to do with Tag Heuer's mainstream watches. The V4 Monacos were fantastic, but at 6 figures and a few dozen pieces made, who would ever know? This is relevant to what Tag does.
Exactly.
It's not priced inconceivably beyond what a Tag collector might think about buying a few years down the line, once he's become seasoned, gotten used to the idea of investing in watches. And an $18,000 Tourbillon is something that's realistically going to be conceived within the same frame of reference as watches costing $8,000, $12,000, $15,000 from Tag. They may not sell many watches in that price point, but it becomes an obtainable goal for the Tag collector or the guy who maybe was dedicated to Rolex complications.
I mean, this thing is
or the guy who bought
gorgeous.
a moon watch. You're talking a few $1,000s more than a dark side of the moon or a gray side of the moon.
For a Turb chrono, yeah.
Yeah, suddenly that Tag Heuer Grand Complication belongs in the frame with what they normally produce within, you know, conceivable, if I change some priorities, I might be able to do this, you know, flights of fancy by owners.
But I guess that's the key, is that instead of trying to produce more expensive watches, that people would associate that price point with a different brand, which I think really caused collectors and people to shy away from those pieces, even though that they were, you know, call it ahead of their time. I think having high complications at, you know, at call it Tag Heuer level prices is really smart, because I think it keeps people in the brand, and I also think that it brings people from other brands into Tag Heuer. Somebody that says, you know what, I really want a Tourbillon, you know, I want something nice and functional, and you know, there's not that many great options.
And this is also wonderful.
I should say there's not that many great options under $20,000.
It's also wonderful because they managed to do all of that and incorporate it into what is, for better or worse, become their current design language. This looks like the Carrera 01. And again, because it's priced at about $18,000, you know, that's a couple
with the connected, it's 15 and change without.
Yeah, you can get it for 15 and change as just a Tourbillon chronograph. Think about that, guys. If you showed up on a Harley Davidson, if you showed up on a Ducati, I wouldn't be like, oh, you must be a millionaire. But that's the kind of money that if you had different priorities and put your money into your watches, if that were your passion, you could make this Tourbillon chronograph happen. Whereas, you know, you show up in a Maybach with a Patek Phillipe 5016R, okay, those are two things of which I will never partake. Yeah, that is kind of, at least the 5016R is. Yeah. I don't know about the Maybach.
I don't know about the Maybach, but the 5016R, I mean, that's hot.
Yeah, so, okay, so hold the car, but the point is, this is playing in a realm where average people who set the priority on watches and watch collecting can make this dream happen. So we have some interesting questions
coming. So I'm going to
coming.
answer beauty of scent, because they've asked the question a couple times, and I just want to get to them. So, do I prefer leather band watches or bracelet, and why? Honestly, like, I would say neither. You know, I'm you know, pro bracelet, pro strap. I really think it depends on the watch and depends on what it is I'm looking at. Right now, I'm probably a little bit bracelet heavy in my collection, simply based on the watches that I've been wearing more regularly than not. I actually find that I wear rubber straps more than I do leather straps. You know what, it really depends on the watch, because sometimes I have like maybe I have an off wrist size, but I always feel like a leather strap might fit me like a little bit too big or a little bit too small, and like I'm having to poke the hole in the center between the holes. I actually just found out today, which I didn't even know, that you can special order a strap from Patek or most brands where they will move the holes up that like in between size to get you for the right fit. I honestly, I didn't even know that.
For years, ABP in Paris has been doing just one hole. You send them your wrist size, they send you a strap with one hole, and it's for you and only you. Or you can do what I do and just punch a different hole in it.
Well, and you know, to answer Jeff, you know, obviously leather doesn't scratch as badly, but most of my watches, I mean, again, not all of the wear is for me. I prefer to purchase my watches, you know, depending upon the watch, pre-owned, and I'm also not a big proponent of refinishing my watches. You know, I've never had any of them refinished, and you know what, I don't mind, you know, having them beat up and sort of worn. So a watch like this, honestly, like I don't know how much is me relative to how much was the original owner. You know, I probably had the watch decased, cleaned, movement checked, recased, put back together, and that was it.
Yeah, for the most part, I opt out of refinishing when I send a watch in for service. The only reason to really refinish, and the reason you see refinishing done so often, is because people want to sell watches, and they generally try to dress it up before they sell it. And unfortunately, a lot of people will just have it refinished rather than serviced. A service and a refinish should always go hand in hand. You should never refinish without a service, in my opinion. The two should always coincide.
Answering Joshua Polanski, are Aquanauts raising in value now? I was looking into one and looks like the price jumped a bit. I would say that Aquanaut prices have probably jumped 10% in the past 90 days or so. You know what, with the Nautilus behaving the way that it's behaving, you know, it's brought up all of their sport watches, and I think that everything from the 5167 Aquanaut to the 5164 is probably bringing about 10% more now than it was even 90 days ago.
Interesting question coming through. This is from... Oh man, I kind of lost it, but the question was, what is the largest, oh here it is, Jay Sykes. Tim, what is the biggest watch you would own? This goes for Tim and Brian. Here's the thing, it's not really about the size, because there are some 43mm watches and 44mm watches. For instance, let's just stay within the JLC family for easy reference. The original Master minute repeater Antoine Lecoultre was a 44mm watch, and on my wrist it may as well be a clock. I can't wear that thing. On the other hand, I own a Master Compressor Extreme World Alarm that on paper is even bigger. It's over 46, but it's a hybrid of steel and titanium. The lugs are shaped differently. It's on a nice flexible rubber strap that you can pull straight down. A lot depends on the shape of the case, the distance lug to lug, the shape of the lugs, and the kind of strap and clasp. A lot goes into the alchemy of fit, including what I think looks right on my wrist. And sometimes a watch that just arcs around the wrist rather than flare straight out is going to get the nod, even if it's on the bigger side. Exactly
as Tim said. You know what? The particular case and watch matters. You know, for example, the 44 offshore is still a little bit larger on me at 44, but you know, it fits. The 42 offshore diver fits me bigger than the way that than the 44 fits for whatever reason. So it's the kind of thing, honestly, I just recommend trying the watch on, getting a feel for it, and taking a look. You know, I don't think I would probably own a watch personally larger than 44, just because I don't think that I can pull off a size, you know, bigger than that. I don't even own any watches currently in my collection that are even 44. Probably the biggest that I have is 42 at this point.
Yeah, I've got that one big Compressor Extreme. That's my biggest watch by a country mile. But I'll say this, I told you I couldn't wear the 44mm Master minute repeater. The second execution from 2011 with finer lugs and more of a curvature to the lugs, I can wear that one easily. In fact, I would buy that watch if we ever got it here at Watchbox. So question coming in, this is a great question because it's probably been the basis for more accidental returns than any other single feature of a watch that's functioning properly. Okay, Vincent Tan asks, Tim, why are some high-end movements like the JLC Memovox so noisy? It sounds like it's moving around inside the case. The reason, very simply, is unlubricated ceramic bearings. If you've ever been really into inline skating, modern bicycles, possibly skateboarding, then you know that ceramic bearings, which are basically little round rocks inside metal tracks, that's called a hybrid ceramic bearing, metal race ceramic ball, they operate without lubrication, so there's nothing to buffer that contact and smooth it out or deaden the sound. And in general, the bigger you make the bearing, the lower the drag. So the bigger you make the bearing, the larger you can make the oscillating weight, or the heavier you can make the oscillating weight. You wind up with a very efficient and minimal maintenance winding system, but it sounds like there is, I mean, it sounds like a broken kiln.
Yeah, I mean, certain watches do sound, like my 5980 actually has like a loud sounding movement.
Ceramic bearings.
And, you know, again, in agreement with you, it's something that people notice very quickly. And it's something that people sort of always have that feeling like there could be something wrong with their watch, and quickly have to explain like, hey, there's nothing wrong. This is exactly how the watch is supposed to sound and look. But you almost feel, it's interesting. You almost feel the rotor moving around, which is I actually enjoy it. I don't mind it. I actually I like that sort of movement from the watch.
I'll throw this out too, guys. Today, almost everyone, with the exception of ETA non-7750 calibers, so like your Omega 8500s and 9300s, they're all bidirectional rotating. Rolex calibers, all bidirectional winding. Audemars Piguet 3120 series movements, all bidirectional winding. Almost everyone else is using unidirectional winding, which means that every time you move your wrist, in general, the rotor's going to kick in an unloaded direction where it doesn't wind. So when it winds, you know, it's going to make a quarter turn, a half turn, and you're going to hear those bearings briefly. But when it kicks in the unloaded direction, a unidirectional modern winding system with ceramic bearings is going to sound like you threw a whole bunch of marbles across the floor. Combining unidirectional winding, which is very much a modern phenomenon and a modern engineering solution, with big ceramic bearings makes for a very noisy watch. Add a titanium case, and it's going to sound like a maraca in the hand.
You guys get all that? But no. So again, we're at the tail end of our show. So I just want to thank everybody for logging on. I want to wish everybody a happy holiday, and we will be back before the new year. So you know, just a happy holiday. My name is Brian. This is Tim. This is the Watch Insider, and thank everybody for logging on.